Thanks for turning up in all of this hot heat. And especially thanks to the Origamis for sponsoring all of this business. As you know, their motto is free poetry. And it's not just that they offer poetry for free, it's also that we need to free poetry. And so that's why I'm here. I want to start off, as is my custom, and read you a poem about our state's only indigenous poisonous snake. Okay. A little less on the reverb, maybe. We do actually have an indigenous poisonous snake, and it's not the rattlesnake. Although they do have rattlesnakes in Massachusetts and Connecticut, I'm told, but for some reason they don't cross the border. And by saying indigenous poisonous snake, I'm certainly not referring to anyone in particular at the State House. The kind of snake that we do actually have that is indigenous, I must really like to say the word indigenous, because I've said it like 5 times now, is the water moccasin. And this poem is about 1/3 true and about 2/3 untrue. The water moccasin. My brother saw it first, just a little head like a shiny stone sliding through the lake, maybe 30 yards offshore. My brother was 10 that summer. I was 15 and goofy and confused. The moccasin was ancient and refused to believe or be denied. As we watched, it swam toward us, headed right for our beach. Soon it would be within reach of our legs. Its eyes were amber and foil. My brother and I were astonished and frozen. The snake was now only a handful of feet away, its body curling cruel shapes through the water, its back a puzzle of geometry. I might have killed it with the hoe leaning next to the cabin. I might have tried to come to terms, boy to snake. But a jet screamed overhead from the airbase nearby, and a water skier plowed in for a landing on the beach, and the moccasin slipped down inside the mystery of the lake, and my brother became a data analyst and moved to Wisconsin. That part is He's still here in Rhode Island. I probably said this to this group before, but I've been married almost all of my life. And sometimes it feels even longer than that. Most marriages, as we all know, end in divorce. And most people, by the time they get to be middle-aged, have been married 6, 7, 8 times, right? But we haven't. We've been together nearly 40 years, and people are astonished at that figure, and they always ask, how do you manage to do it? And there's really no secret. We had our last fight in 1983, and got everything kind of cleared up then, and we've had a little spats now and then since then, but all the big issues are long, long dead, and it's not worth it to even bring them up on the negotiating table anymore. But once in a while, we do have a difference of opinion, and that is the basis of this particular poem. It's called High Dark Windows. After our fight, I stormed down to the basement to crease my anger by folding the laundry, fuming among our mutual fabrics. But there was your stained sweatshirt, both arms entwined around the leg of my brown cords, and all that interlocking underwear everywhere. We are one creature, my love. The dryer knows it, and so does the bed, where we will lie again tonight behind the high, dark windows. The wind will creak the clapboard softly. Jets flying overhead will cut their engines. The owl, knowing who, will not ask why. The clock will tick till the batteries die, and we will sleep the same exact sleep. Snore rough, syncopated songs. Wake up to the same dawn, with the same morning mouth, bad hair, same lost smile between us. This is a poem that Garrison Keillor read on the air last spring, And it was based on, I was staring out my window, something I spend probably 97% of my life doing. And I was noticing that across the street they were building a house and putting a new addition on. And you've probably noticed this yourself. You have 3 or 4 carpenters up there on the roof and they're all banging their hammers, and it's all not arranged or anything, but once in a while they seem to fall into this kind of beat. And that's what got to me about this song, about this particular poem. It's called Hard Music. The hammers of the builders of the house across the street sometimes fall by accident inside the same beat, as if the rhythm of our separate work can melt without our knowing into something far sleeker than our laboring lives. And I wonder if the carpenters are happy in themselves when they realize how they improvise, how the nails bite the wood to such natural jazz, the house rising tall in grace because of hard music, lifting up its chimneyed head and shoulders to the sky. Thank you. Is it warm in here, or is it planet Earth? I was saying earlier, my own personal theory is that we have slipped out of orbit and are currently hurtling towards the sun, and only Superman can save us. This poem's called She Listened. A lot of people sort of talk at you, and when you reply, you can tell they're not really listening because they're thinking of the next thing they're about to say. And it's such a refreshing and rare occasion when someone, you can pick up the vibe, they're actually really listening. It's scary. She listened. She listened to me like I was the Grand Canyon into which she had just tossed a pea. Like I was a giant cloud and she was thirsty brown earth. She leaned over and looked at me like God had just appeared on her iPhone. She listened like she was reading my lips with her own. She listened to me like a customs officer suspecting I had lied about my luggage. Like I was a coyote who had just chewed off its own foot to escape the sprung trap she had baited with perfection just by listening. This poem is called Suck. Now that used to be a terrible word. I mean, you know, if I said that word when I was 8 years old, my mother would shave off my eyebrows and sew my lips together with fishing line or some horrible thing like that. But that's another story completely. But it's interesting now that you can turn on NBC News and hear Brian Williams say, you know, the Republicans today really sucked in Congress, or something to that effect. It's become coinage of the realm, so I have to honor the word. And here's the poem, Suck. You suck. You've always sucked. Even before birth, the idea of you floating invisibly through the cosmos sucked. Even before your parents were introduced at that boring party and he ladled her a plastic cup of punch while planning his strategy for getting her naked, you sucked. You sucked as a toddler. Sucked when you got your head stuck in the playpen bars. Chased the cat with a bat. Sucked when you jammed a coat hanger in the toaster. And you totally suck as an adult. The wrinkles, the sagging gut, the 50 shades of gray. Even your inner child sucks. All the people in the world bopping down the sidewalk, people who couldn't care less, who have never met you and wouldn't want to, think you suck because you do. So go ahead, write this poem. It's sure to suck too. Yes, it does, but that's the point. Thank you, I think. Sarcastic applause. What a strange concept. This one's called First Poem, and it's not the first poem I ever wrote, but it's about the first time I felt like I wanted to try to write a poem. I guess I was about 8 or 9 years old, and I took a camping trip in a canoe down a river with my dad, and it just changed everything forever. And so I just wanted to try to honor that experience when I first felt this strange itch that I can never seem to scratch. First poem. My father sat in the stern, sternly guiding us into the current, eyes shaded by a battered hat as I sat in the bow, dizzy with joy at riding the river, at being this boy. And at noon we beached on a sandbar and, sandwich in hand, watched the ducks fly away, quacking fear. My father offered me sips of his beer and then went for a swim. And stripped bare, I glanced at the places his body grew hair, and he said that I would as well, all too soon. And that night we sat silent and stared at the moon rising up through the forest, and I felt the dark breeze lift the light from the day like campfire smoke out over the river and forever, forever away. As a poet, and well, I'm speaking to other poets, I realize we're all of the sort of same tribe, but there's this opposing tribe, and I'm here to alert you to them. They're called lit crits. We don't like them because they wanted to be poets, but they just couldn't cut it. So they took an alternate path and got a PhD in literary criticism. A lot of times folks in academia will come to campus to try to get a job, and it's our department's job to kind of listen to them in a classroom while they make their formal presentation. And we had a woman some years back who was trying to get a job at Bryant, and she gave a talk to our department, and the theme of her talk was locationality. What is locationality? It's location. I don't know why they have to have this very strange language that's all their own. So I wrote this poem about that sort of language. It's called narratology. Now here I thought I was making this word up, but you know, some years back I gave a reading down at the University of Mississippi, and the English department took me out to dinner afterwards, and one of the colleagues in that department was sitting next to me, and the first thing he said to me was, "That's a real word, you know. You didn't make that up. That is actually a word." Okay, fine. Narratology. Let us be pronouns. Together convolute our syntax convolute. Let us bathe naked in steamy sentences describing water. Dive beneath whole paragraphs about the wild sea. Let us write each chapter as a single pair of hands, elide each word distinctively from my tongue unto yours. Explore each throbbing adjective for shades of implication. Taste each other's adverbs tenderly. And in the vaguely detailed denouement and asymmetricality so prevalent in such post-structured stories, I will pose as parenthetic, wrapped around your character, my metaphor embedded in your text. We have filthy minds, all of you. It's a perfectly innocent observation. Well, I want to switch gears a little bit now and talk about politics. Nothing too particularly partisan, because that's far too disgusting to even mention. Not partisan politics, but injustice. There are so many various forms and shades and nuances of injustice. We have to pick from the various menus of injustices and decide which one pushes our buttons. The one that really gets me is economic injustice, and that's the basis of this poem. It's called Aftermath. There is the man who repairs the shoes he could never afford, and the man who prepares the food he is unprepared to eat. And there is the red-kneed woman who washes the floors of the rooms she is not allowed to enter in daylight. There is the one who hangs from a harness to scrape the windows of the penthouse suite and overhear the glib jokes of millionaires. And there is the one who stirs the drinks, knows the fumbling of meaningless hands, ripe breath of longing. Someone must serve as the king's first taster, and someone account for the accountant's suicide. And there is the woman who must scrub the toilet she is not permitted to sit upon, but does anyway, and feels for a moment the way the perfect feel always, and in aftermath, perhaps a quiet dignity that lasts for a good 20 minutes. I've long had this theory about Rhode Island that is that it's so small and so utterly congested and just everyone has seen everyone else at least once. That's my theory. Either you went to high school with somebody's second cousin, or you unknowingly passed them on the freeway or something like that. But everyone in Rhode Island has at least seen every other person. That is a very discomforting thought. Just dwell on that for a second. This poem is called The Secret Life of Rhode Island. Perhaps they had passed on the mall escalator, one climbing higher, the other sinking fast. Or perhaps she had glimpsed him flashing by on the freeway through the tangled towns that bled into each other, wrapped around a piece of sea. Or maybe her cousin went to high school with him, rode the same bleacher, failed the same tests, cheered the same losers of games. She watched him feed bags of groceries to his car, watched the way his hair flagged the wind, the curious arch of his brow, how he coiled himself behind the wheel, cranked the radio, chirped his tires, and she knew him, or knew someone who did, as the sun exploded the sky into westering fire, and he hung a quick right and vanished in traffic without even thinking of using his blinker. I wrote this poem during the so-called, and I use the term very loosely, Arab Spring, because it looks like it never really happened at this point, but hey, who am I to say? I got this strange impression during all of that, because if you recall, I know it was last spring, late last winter actually, it was one of the snowiest winters we'd ever had. And so the two things that kept running through my mind as I sat at my computer screen was this idea of unending snow, which seems so utterly alien right now. Unending snow, and the idea of all these folks in the Middle East protesting their dictatorships. And so I wrote this poem to try to sort of mesh these two very disparate things together. It's called Snow. Falls on the tyrant, bellowing into the microphone, telling the protesters he will kill their children. Falls on the generals standing behind him, their proudly medaled chests, mirrored sunglasses, their arrogance. Chills the torturer as he walks across the parking lot. Falls on the secret cinder block rooms. Falls on the ones throwing rocks at the tanks. Falls on the tanks. Falls through the clouds of tear gas. Muffles the gunfire. Falls on the graves and the graveless. Covers the rubble, the school with broken windows where dead children hunch over their desks. Covers the screaming, the chanting, the blood in the streets, turning slowly pink, then a white as the sky, making everything look as if nothing had happened at all. I'm looking around, I don't see anyone's eyes glazing over quite yet. I see several getting a bit bloodshot, but that's what we're here for. So I'm just going to read you a couple more. I'm fascinated by the fact that it turns out that all of our body parts are interchangeable. Medical technology is such now that you can have all of your limbs amputated and replaced with artificial limbs, and you can have your stomach removed and replaced with an artificial stomach, and your lungs and everything, really, and including your heart. You can't yet have your brain transplanted, but stay tuned, that's coming soon. And I know a few people that I would like to nominate for such an operation. Anyway, this is about heart transplants, the granddaddy of all transplants. It's called Heart Transplant Patient. Someone else's loneliness is stitched into my chest. I'm told a life stopped suddenly. Someone was contemplating dinner, had just flashed on a recent movie, saw the yield sign, but forgot, and fell inside whatever's left of eternity. They said this heart was salvaged from the ruins of the body, then sewn tight inside my own life while I was lost in sleep. When I go, I've left instructions to pass it onward yet again. Too bad we can't all fall like this. Fill ourselves with a borrowed heart, borrowed heart, borrowed heart. Fill ourselves with a borrowed heart, then give it away to a stranger. I'm just going to read you one more and then make plenty of room for the other folks on the bill. This is a poem about gratitude, and I know I may come across as this curmudgeonly guy. I know my students always tell me that, and certainly my wife tells me that 17 times a day. But underneath this crust, I'm actually very thankful. I really, truly am. And so I wanted to honor this feeling of gratitude with this poem. It's called Be Thanking. Sometimes I am being like all thanking and thanking, like when I am in a field or looking at one. And sometimes I am looking at the fields of sea and like thanking and thanking you for what is under everything but darkness. And when the goat skin is being empty and I am inside my stomach swimming in the red wine, I am also being like all thanking and thanking you who hides behind the blue sky, behind my aching. And then I am to lick my paw and be thanking and thanking, because nothing tastes as good or as bad. And thank you very much.